I can see that we're not yet on YouTube, but now we are.
Yeah.
Awesome. So welcome everyone to the Xamarin user group session today. We have anyways, we have Steve Bilogan from the Uno platform with us today, and Steve's going to tell us everything about Uno. Right, Steve?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we cannot hear you, or I cannot hear you.
Oh. Hello, hello, hello. Can't hear me?
It works. Works. Go ahead.
Good. You can hear me? Okay. Okay, let me just pull up my slides. Okay, so all right. So I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Steve Bilogan. I am an engineer working on the Uno platform team. I'm excited to talk to you today about how we can utilize C# and XAML, the power of C# and XAML, and bring that experience and those capabilities to all platforms. So let's get started. Okay, good. You can hear me. I see the chat. So the problem this is a slide that we probably see a lot of when you're talking about cross-platform development solutions, but the problem that we're trying to tackle is thinking about projects that stretch across multiple platforms, and there's multiple problems with that. Number one, there's a potential for effort duplication there. So since we need to re-implement logic for each individual platform, it's a lot of potential for different bugs and different scenarios and all those things like that. So another scenario is trying to revive. What's happening a lot now is companies are trying to revive legacy business applications and bring them into the 21st century. So this could lead to very high rewrite costs. So they're trying to bring things like mainframe apps and stuff like that to the web. And so a lot of legacy apps now are being brought to the web thanks to things like WebAssembly, which we'll get into in a little bit. And you also need to take into account the skill set of your current team and the available training and availability of those developers for the technologies that you'd like to use. So if you're predominantly a .NET shop and you want to start, developing mobile applications, you might want to look towards a .NET solution rather than hiring and have to train everyone for native Android and native iOS development. So there's really all these trade-offs that you have to think of. And the solution that we really see that Uno fits into here is the fact that we like to call Uno truly universal. And so what is meant by that is we believe that WinUI is WinUI, which is the API layer that we implement, and I'll get into an explanation of what that is. But we believe it's the best framework built from the ground up with responsiveness and adaptiveness in mind, which means by leveraging things like WinUI, you can have something working on a small mobile device all the way up to a large 4K screen with everything in the middle. And so with Uno, we're building this bridge for this WinUI technology and bringing it up and above Windows to all other platforms, making it truly universal. And so I just mentioned WinUI, and if in case you don't know what it is, let's just get like a baseline understanding of what it is. And the next few slides are courtesy of Ryan Demopoulos' talk from Microsoft from Uno conference, from UnoConf 2020, which is available online on YouTube, I believe. So definitely go check it out. It's a really great talk. So over the years, from the Windows perspective, there's been about 4 major UX frameworks that have been developed. So there's MFC, there was WinForms, and then the big guys. So there was WPF in 2006, which introduced XAML, a sophisticated animation system, data binding, new layouting, and then came along UWP XAML in 2012. And so UWP XAML, is similar in nature, but it can be seen as an evolution of WPF. And it introduced fluent design system, more advanced animations, new controls that go above and beyond WPF. And so UWP XAML was created for UWP apps. So when I talk about UWP apps, I mean those Windows 10 store apps that run in that sandbox. And so basically there are two types of Windows apps, those UWP apps, those Windows 10 store apps, and the Windows Desktop Win32 applications, like I just mentioned, that rely mostly on the frameworks to the left. So this leads into some challenges for UWP XAML. It can't be used by all app types, so it's UWP only. So you can't use this, the latest and greatest UX framework can only be used for one type of app in the Windows ecosystem. Number two is it's difficult to deliver these new features since new features into the mass market, since UWP XAML framework is baked into the operating system itself. So it's hard to deliver these new features. For example, like Xbind, which is a feature. It needs to be shipped with a completely new version of Windows. But not everyone always runs the latest version of Windows, so some features don't get adapted into that mass market right away on day one. And lastly, because UWP XAML ships, like I said, within the operating system itself, you can get an inconsistent behavior across versions. So if you have certain controls or certain features like Xbind again, it may behave differently on different versions of Windows. So it's really a compatibility headache. And that's where the WinUI library comes into play here and came to be. So the library itself, do I have my laser pointer? Yeah. So the library itself right now, the WinUI 2 library, is just a small library. Just think of it as a small library of controls and styles that exist. And it's built on top of the UWP XAML framework itself, but it's decoupled from the Windows OS. So this solves some of the challenges that were mentioned previously. You're able to backport features on day one, regardless of the operating system. You get a consistent behavior across all OS versions, since it's one implementation outside of the OS, and you have that flexibility to ship new features and fixes whenever they're needed. So that in itself, that standalone library plus the UWP XAML is what we call today WinUI 2. So the WinUI 2 library, still reliant on the Windows OS itself because it does rely on this UWP XAML. And in the future, the next step would be to decouple all of the WinUI controls and styles and library from the OS, not just that smaller subset. And this is where WinUI 3 comes into play. So this is taking the second generation of WinUI, lifting it all out of the OS and bringing all those UX features into a decoupled library. And just one final, and that's WinUI 3. And just one final thing, the biggest distinguishing characteristic of WinUI 3 over WinUI 2 is that it'll work across all app types. So you can build Win32 desktop apps and Windows 10 UWP applications using this WinUI 3 framework. So now that we sort of have an idea of like what WinUI is and what it's trying to accomplish and where it's coming from, we get that baseline understanding, and I can answer some of the questions of what is Uno and how we're taking those features and capabilities of WinUI and bringing them above and beyond Windows to all platforms. So Uno Platform is, just as the quick one-liner here, Uno Platform is an open source project which helps enterprise developers build single code-based C# and WinUI XAML applications for non-Windows platforms. So Windows is built on top of .NET, and it also takes advantage of the great Windows platform features, such as things like accessibility, touch, keyboard management, focus management, as well as rich controls like calendar, grid, charts, and anything that's coming from the framework itself, or the Windows Community Toolkit, or third-party vendors like Infragistics and Syncfusion, all of which have Uno support. So I said before that the Uno platform is truly universal, but what I also mean is that it's truly native. So we sit on top of the native stacks here, and we're not trying to just draw pixels. We want to make sure we get all the native behaviors of gestures, of accessibility, etc. So we sit on top of WinUI sorry, we sit on top of UIKit or AppKit when we're talking about macOS or iOS. We sit on top of the Android Views engine when we're talking Android. We're generating native elements in the DOM when we're talking about WebAssembly. And so we wanted to reach even more platforms and more backends. So we also leverage Skia as a backend to bring WinUI to even more platforms. So now you can write C# and XAML applications, and it'll be bridged over to things like Linux and WPF or Windows 7 applications. And this is just to drive home, again, this truly native line that I mentioned. So in the WinUI world, in your C# and your XAML, you'll be defining something like a text block that's from the WinUI API layer. But really what's happening behind the scenes is that you're getting a UI label on iOS, you're getting a text view, you're getting an HTML paragraph element in the DOM. And as well for the UI layer, for the platform APIs as well, you're still having access to those native platform APIs just through an API layer of WinUI itself. And so we're actually running out of room on this slide as we add more platforms, but this is just, and we'll get into some demos and some code later, but this is just a quick view of sort of what Uno looks like, I guess. So this is your XAML here that you're defining with your WinUI APIs, and you have your text block and you have a slider component. And that's basically it. You define this once, and Uno takes care of the rest, and you get it on all the platforms here, on Linux, on Mac, on web, and out of the box it'll look the same. And we'll get into styling and themes later on. But out of the box, you can see it. It looks the same across the platforms, and you get a consistent behavior on all these platforms that we support. And so there's no better way to talk about Uno than at the pixel level. So I have to change the slide. It says in 2020. In 2021, we believe designers and developers should be able to control how apps look, even when using multi-platform frameworks. So that's really important to us. And so there are multiple strategies on the market that try to do this in different ways, try to control how apps look. And we just want to talk about some of these strategies and where Uno sort of fits in and lands within these strategies. So if you look at one end of the spectrum here, there's people on this end here, on this native rendering. There are people that are creating abstractions on top of the native platforms, and then they just basically let the native platform controls render themselves on their own. So they let the native system do its thing and render it, and you don't get too much control over how your views will look on certain platforms or all platforms. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have this canvas rendering. So basically the idea is you just slap a canvas on the screen and you draw every single pixel yourself. Losing some of the native behaviors, maybe like copy paste or localization or accessibility. So there's benefits and trade-offs to both ends of the spectrum. And we believe that Uno sort of fits right in the middle of this. So we like to say it's at the crossroads of native and pixel perfect. And this is done by relying on things like lookless controls or control templating, thanks to WinUI. So basically, with Uno, you'll be given the ability to style any control any way you want. So if you have a button, the button you have the ability to access that button's template and basically style it however you want. You can make it look crazy. You can make it look exactly the same on all screens. You can make it on all platforms. You can make it look different per platform. You have total control over that. So that's really why we think we're at that crossroads of pixel perfect and native and native. So just an idea of how it works, and we'll get into some samples just in a second. But basically what we're doing is we're implementing the API surface of UWP and WinUI. And so that is a very large API surface. And so there are many UI APIs like text block, image, stack panel, navigation view. All those things are being implemented, as well as non-UI APIs. So things like file access or geolocation, or depending on which devices you're running on, sensors, and things like that. And I lost my train of thought. But anyway, you can write apps in XAML and C#. You can either start from scratch, or like you'll see in a second, you can import an existing UWP app or library. So if you have an existing UWP application right now, an existing Windows Store application, you can plug Uno Platform into it and bring it to all these other platforms with very little effort. And we have documentation on how to do that. And we'll see an example of that being done in a second. But in order to showcase that native support for styling, like I was mentioning before, we do support, and I'll mention in a second, we do support the Fluent UI design system from Windows, as well as the Material design system. And in order to showcase that, we released this Uno Galleries app. It allows you to see all the controls that are readily available to be able to be toggled from different themes, from Fluent to Material, between light and dark. You can copy your markup straight from the gallery and just paste it into your app. And it runs everywhere. You can also see how you can style your apps to rely on the native control rendering, giving you full control if you do want to have that per platform look for some of your widgets. So this is the idea that you can have an application-wide style, or you could just let Uno step out of the way and let the native rendering do its thing, and it'll have a native look on each platform as well. So let's see if I could pull this up. Does that work? I'm trying to see if it goes on the screen. Yeah, it does. Cool. So this is the Uno Gallery app running in WebAssembly. So if I were to press F12, which isn't working for some reason. Oh, there you go. Why is my... I wanted to show you developer tools. Oh, there you go. So if I refresh over the network, this is running in WebAssembly, which we'll get into a small explanation of what that is in a second. But if I were to refresh, you could actually see over here, coming down the wire is mono, or is .NET, is all the bits of .NET that you need to be able to run this as a single web application in the browser. So I thought that was really cool to see. You could also see Uno coming down the pipe as well. Here it is, uno.clr. So basically that's just coming down the pipe through the browser to be able to run in your browser everything there without having to have this server or anything like that. So this is the, oh, my computer is running super slow. This is the Uno Gallery app. So you can see it has light and dark mode support. My computer is very slow right now. Sorry for this. So you can toggle between material design. So you have these material buttons and with the ripples and everything, material text blocks, check boxes, radio buttons, toggle switches, all this fun stuff. Is it on the screen? Yes, it is. And as well as many other things, but this is just the overview page of some of the basic controls. And you can toggle that between material and light dark, material and Fluent themes. So you get that WinUI, that Microsoft theme from it, as well as if I were running this on my Android phone or something, I'd probably have another toggle here for native, and click there, and you would see the native, what you get out of the box when you're doing native Android development. You'd see native buttons and everything here. So that's just a little example of, oh, there we go. Now it's fast. That's just a little example of the power of the styling and the control templating that you get out of the box with Uno. So if we go back to the slides, where are my things? Oh, yeah. And so one of the great things is that you can reuse any existing .NET Standard 2.0 libraries that you have or that you like to use for your applications can be used with an Uno application, as well as great third-party control support from people like Syncfusion or Infragistics, and there are many others coming. But Syncfusion and Infragistics are very, very large component vendors. that basically have a large suite of very complex and useful UI controls. And those are supported with Uno, and we'll see an example of that in a second, but those are supported, and you get that, that support with Uno, no problem. As well as presentation frameworks. So if you like to use things like MVVM Cross or Prism or Reactive UI, or the Windows Community Toolkit now has an MVVM toolkit in it. You get those. Those have support for Uno. It's not an extra package or anything. Like, you don't have to get like a Prism.Uno. It's whatever. It's built into Prism itself. So if you have the Prism package, you can run it in an Uno application. Which I thought was really cool. So Uno was originally created to address cross-platform development for Android and iOS all the way back in 2013. And so there were a lot of professional apps that were created for Android and iOS back then. And so that's really, its genesis was back then for addressing this cross-platform design and development. And then in around 2018, we saw what was happening with WebAssembly. And so WebAssembly is a way of running all types of code. I should probably put this in an earlier slide, but WebAssembly is a way of running all types of code, not just JavaScript, in the browser natively. So it runs within the security model of the browsers. There are no security problems like there were with third-party solutions like Silverlight or Flash. And you could say that we're sort of reviving the main goal and the main idea of Silverlight is now being brought back to life thanks to Uno. And so at that time, .NET or Mono was being brought to WebAssembly by the Xamarin team. And so it was thought, let's try and run Uno in the browser and just see what happens, because, like, we're relying on .NET, we're sitting on top of it. And so Uno was running in the browser in no time using WebAssembly, and it was open source basically around that same time. And I believe that they were, running around with a laptop at Build, at Microsoft Build conference around the show floor with a beta build of Uno running in the web. And since then, it's just been a lot of developments, integration or support for Entity Framework, for the Windows Community Toolkit, lots of tech stuff. So full AOT and mixed mode AOT. So, and then, like I mentioned before, reactive UI testing, which we'll get into, but we are definitely a big proponent of UI testing. And then through the years, there's just been a lot of stuff that's been coming. We've added new platforms, macOS and Linux, which I can't put macOS here. I don't know where Linux is. It's somewhere. We added Material and Fluent UI, and we're continuing into this year with the 3.5 that has been released and was released at the same time as the WinUI Preview 4, with 3.6 coming soon, coming alongside what was just dropped with WinUI 3 Preview 5 or Project Reunion 0.5. So lots of great things coming in 2021, a lot of features being worked on, a lot of cool things. So definitely stay tuned. And so some of the things that you get out of the box with Uno, like I mentioned before, this control templating, and like we saw in the Uno gallery, this idea that you can you have these lookless controls that you can style however you want, natively or same across all platforms. And in that same vein, you get that styling and that theming engine from WinUI. Another great thing is conditional XAML. So if a lot of the time in cross-platform development, when you have things like, I don't know, on iOS, you want different spacing, or you don't want this element to be left aligned, you want it to be right aligned on a different platform or something like that. You have the ability to tag your XAML code with a proper namespace like iOS or not Windows or not Skia or only Android, and you could tag elements or attributes in your XAML to be able to be platform specific. You can just drop in native controls. So just drop native controls into your XAML and it should work, and it'll be bindable and all that fun stuff, as well as other stuff that you get out of the box because we're sitting on top of WinUI. You get that animation system, you get those data bindings, you get shapes and brushes, which I work a lot on. So lots of great stuff. And one of the things that it seems like a boring slide, but it's one of my favorite ones, and we'll see an example of it in a second. One of the great things is that assets are added, assets such as like images, but as well as strings, you only have to add once in your code. So we'll see this project structure of an Uno app in a second. But basically, you have to add, you don't have to deal with iOS's assets where you have to add an at2x, at3x, or you have to add your different densities in Android. So you have to add your images into an MDPI, HDPI, XHDPI. You don't have to do any of that. You just drop it once into the assets folder. You can have the scale suffix on your files if you wanted it to be placed into the proper folders. But basically, Uno will then take those and put them into the proper folders for you, depending on the platform that you're building. And it'll do everything for you, as well as a support for localized assets. So if you set a .lang suffix on your images, it'll properly load the proper one depending on the localization that you have within your application. And same idea for strings. So localizable strings, they only go in one spot. They go in the UWP, same way that you do a UWP application. They go in the resw file. And you don't have to bother with things like the iOS plist or the Android strings.xml. That's all done for you behind the scenes, thanks to Uno. And this is a slide that I forgot to take out because I just mentioned it. But we do have a great ecosystem of applications and frameworks that Uno supports. Again, and so UI testing. So at Uno Platform, we're a big believer in automated UI testing. So for UI-driven applications, the highest level of confidence you can have in testing is having an automated way of actually interacting with your application. So we created the Uno.UI test framework, which is based on the Xamarin.UI test framework for Android and iOS, and Selenium for WebAssembly. And so it's basically a unified way of defining tests and running them on every supported platform. So unlike Uno, it's free, it's open source, and it's actually used by Uno itself to test and verify our builds. So just a quick example. I don't know if, yeah, you can see that. So you can see it's very similar to the Xamarin UI test way of doing UI testing. You have special helper methods such as wait for dependency property value, which is super important and super useful. And you can see on the right here, this is a WebAssembly Uno app just being tested automatically. There's UI tests going on, filling out a text box and taking screenshots along the way, and it can do screenshot comparison and all that fun stuff. So Fluent UI, so this should go earlier because I already mentioned Fluent UI design system, but it comes baked into the Uno platform. So every time you start a new app with Uno, you'll be able to get access to the Fluent UI design system and have it run and look the same across all platforms. So basically, out of the box, all Uno heads, all Uno platforms will have that nice same look following the Fluent UI design system. And if you don't want to have Fluent UI, you also have access to Material. So there is a Uno Material package that will do the same thing as Fluent. It'll, again, across all platforms, style your applications, but it's still the choice is up to you on what platforms you'd like to have styled in certain ways. So if you want Material on certain platforms and you want the native control rendering to happen on other platforms, that choice is yours, and that'll still work. And so an example of a UWP application that existed before, and I just plugged Uno Platform into it, is this Dexter application. So if you go on GitHub, Disk Loser has this Dexter application. And so basically what it is I was playing around with the Surface Duo emulator. And if you don't know what the Surface Duo is Microsoft's Android phone that is dual screen, and it's sort of like opens like a book like this. That's my very technical demo because I don't have one. I was playing around with it, and I thought it would be really cool because it sort of looks like a Pokedex, and it would be really cool to have a Pokedex app on it. So it could act like one, with the dual screen support and everything. And so I was starting to look into it and starting to see how we do dual screens on Android natively and all that stuff. And then I just had the idea, like, oh, let's see if I could use Uno with it. So the first thing I did, because I didn't want to do it myself, I just looked for any existing UWP application that someone created that is a Pokedex app. And I found this one by Disk Loser on GitHub called Dexer. And it hadn't been touched, I don't think, on GitHub for like 4 or 5 years. So it was an older application. But I pulled it down, I plugged Uno into it, I added the support for Uno supports dual screens, so I added that support for dual screens using the split view. Using this, we'll see in a second what I used, and it worked, and everything worked. You know, the transitions, you could see the GIF here, but everything's working. The assets are all loaded properly, and we'll take a look at it in a second here. If I could just pull it up. So this should be, my emulator is running very slow. Actually, I'm just going to kill the app first. Oh God, how do you kill the app? There you go. Actually, we'll look at the code first. That's a good idea. So, Dex Uno. Oh my God, my computer is dying today. Okay, so let's look at the solution. So this is what an Uno app basically looks like. I just want to make sure it's showing up on the screen. Yes, okay. So this is what an Uno app actually looks like. So basically, you have your project heads here. And so you have Android, iOS, macOS, Linux, WPF, UWP, and WebAssembly. And these all just come out of the box for you when I plugged Uno into this old application. And so the only thing that had to be done was I had to take everything that was currently in this UWP application, because at first it was only a UWP head, and place it into this new shared project. And if you're not familiar with shared projects, basically it's just a bucket of files that all other CS projects will reference and use. So it doesn't compile down to its own special binary or anything like that. It's really just a bucket of files that will be shared across different CS projects. And we'll look into them in a second. But basically, you get all these application platforms for free. And I just had to transfer everything from UWP to the shared project. So if we look inside shared, this is all the application code that was originally in the UWP head, but now exists and shared across all those platform heads. And so you could see here, like I was talking about before, the shared assets. So those assets that get placed in the folders for you, as well as the strings that exists in this assets folder here. So if we open that up, you could see that I have, within assets, I have all the images of the different Pokemon and stuff like that. And these get placed into the proper heads of Android, iOS, WebAssembly, all that for me by Uno. But basically, that is the application. So it looks exactly like a UWP application. So we have our app.xaml here. Just trying to open a file that's already open. Great. My computer. Oh, oops. We have our app.xaml here. That looks, exactly like it would on a base UWP application. But now it's running for all platforms. So if we were to look at the main activity for the Android head, you'd see there's nothing really in it. There's just the main activity, which is taking from this WinUI XAML application activity, which in the backend is Uno doing its fancy stuff. So if we look at the code a little bit, at the Pokedex page, so the main page, this is the only real thing I had to really change. Was once I put Uno into this and it gave me all these platform heads, I installed the Uno dual screen support and the WinUI library. in order to get the two-pane view, which is what we use to utilize multiple screens for dual screens. And you can see the namespace is Muxi here. So if we look up here, Muxi is actually the Microsoft UI XAML controls. So this is a WinUI control that's running on Android for a 5-year-old UWP application, which is really cool. But you can see, so the first pane is just what you'll see is a list of Pokemon, and the second pane here, pane 2, which is going to be screen 2, is the Pokemon detail page for the selected Pokemon that I'm going to pass to that thing. So hopefully this is loaded now. Yeah. So you can see here we have our list of Pokemon. Is that up? Does that show on the screen? Yeah. Okay. So we have our list of Pokemon that you can search through. And if I move this to dual screen, it should go to 2 screens, and you have your Pokemon details screen on the right side now that I've selected Blastoise. Or I can select different Pokemon and different stuff will show up. So yeah, so this is a 5-year-old, hasn't been touched for 5 years, UWP Windows 10 application that is now running on the Android Surface Duo, thanks to Uno platform. So I thought that was a really cool thing to show. And the performance is pretty, I mean, it's a debug build and my computer is like not doing well right now, but the performance is pretty good. Yeah, so I thought that'd be a fun thing to show. So, SkiaSharp support for WebAssembly. So Skia, if you're unaware, is an open source 2D graphics library. And we have Uno platform support for it through out of the box. So if you get the SkiaSharp package, you can use it in Uno applications, and it uses this XAML canvas. So basically, there's Uno support. So you can be given a canvas from Skia, and we can just slap it on the screen and draw pixels doing whatever you want. So it's a very powerful 2D graphics library. And it's available within WebAssembly, within all the other platforms itself. And it's really, really powerful. So we can see an example of Skia being used right now by one of the component vendors that supports Uno, which is Infragistics. If I look at this sample right now, which one is it? This one. Oh God, 1 second. I have to reload it, 1 second. Oh my God. But yeah, basically this is a vendor that uses lots of charts and things like that, and they are relying on Skia to do a lot of these things for them with great performance. That's one of the best things about having Skia run in the web and run in all platforms, is that it is a very, very high performant 2D graphics library. So I'm just going to open it up again because my Visual Studio froze. But while that's loading, we could just talk a little bit about, this is just a slide to mention that Uno is out there. It's in the wild, in the professional world. It's on the App Store. It is being used in release. These are a lot of the clients that we have that are over the years have had apps built with Uno. A lot of them are Canadian applications, so you might not be familiar with all the logos or all the brands. But yeah, it is out there in the world. It is being used. It's professionally supported and professionally built. So it definitely has those capabilities, and that's if you have any ideas that you'd love to build with Uno, we'd love to hear with it. We'd love to partner with you and build something really cool together. So let's see if this is, there we go. Now it's alive. Okay, jeez. So this is an Infragistics application. I'm going to build it if my computer survives. And again, if we look at the application structure, it's the same. We have these platforms, and you have that shared application. There's a lot less code in this one. There's just the main page and a Picture Explorer. But if we look inside Picture Explorer, which we'll see in a second what that is, but you could see that it's using this XAML canvas coming from SkiaSharp, here, SkiaSharp views UWP, which will work for Uno, obviously. Oh, did this run? I think it opened. It did open. Okay. Just let it load for a second. But basically, what we're going to be looking at here is on the top view, you're going to have an image. So you're just going to have a bitmap, and on the bottom view is going to be a graph. And so it's going to follow my pointer. And so any RGB color value that my pointer is on, the graphs will spike with those colors, and you can see a live view of basically the colors that you're hovering over with your mouse. So you see now, is this on the screen? Yeah, it's on the screen. So if I go over this sort of color here, if I go down here, you see it spike into white. If I go down into the red, you see the red value is sort of hovering stable. And it's pretty good. You can see it's very responsive, all thanks to Uno and SkiaSharp. And you can see if I go across, it has this crosshair view where you can see the specific values at specific times that your mouse was over of the RGB values. So it's pretty cool. And if we look, there's not too much to look at the code. But if you were to look, you'd see that it's using this Infragistics XAML data chart. And if we look up here, this is truly coming from the Infragistics control charts. As well as, here's your crosshair layer, which is showing, which was showing those like RGB things when I hovered over the graph. So really cool stuff, very powerful graphing tools, all available within the web, within macOS, within Linux, within all these things, thanks to Uno platform and Infragistics for that. As well, we could take a look at another vendor. Why am I lost here? Sample browser, there you go. We could take a look at a Syncfusion chart. Oh, hello. Let me just turn off. Why am I on focus assist? I don't know. Okay, so we can take a look at Syncfusion sample. But basically, Syncfusion is also one that provides a lot of very cool charts for displaying data and analytics and all that stuff, and they're interactive, and it's really very powerful. And again, I'll show it on the web here. But it's something that's really cool. You should definitely check it out if you go to Syncfusion. They have a lot of amazing things to work with. So my favorite is Donut Chart, so we can check that one out. But basically, you could see, and this is running all one time, so it's defined once in that, what we were looking at before, that main page XAML. Same idea here, it's defined once in that XAML, and it's running across all the platforms that Uno supports. And so you could see you have nice ways of viewing some data. It's interactive, so I could touch it and it'll start moving, or if I hover over here, it has a little pop-up that'll define what you're hovering over, exactly the values. Same idea with any other charts. It's really pretty cool. My computer is really struggling today. But yeah, same idea. So you have all types of charts that you can deal with and play with, and they're all available now in the web, which usually these used to be from the library that we're using. These used to be for UWP applications, but now we've brought it to all these other platforms. So great stuff. Yeah, so once again, yeah, it's truly out there in the wild. Uno, it's not an experimental thing that people aren't really using in release. It's out there and it's being used for sure. And as for the future, we're definitely aligning ourselves with and keeping track, obviously, with what's going on with WinUI 3. As you know, WinUI 3 Project Reunion 0.5 was just dropped, and so we're working hard to align ourselves with that, as well as the future updates of WinUI 3, and support everything that comes out of that. We're also looking on even more supported controls, more platform integrations. Definitely, the API surface of WinUI or VWP is very, very large, and a large chunk of it has been implemented, but there's always more work to do. And improving performance is always paramount. We got a lot of smart people working on that. I'm not working on that, but a lot of smarter people are, and they're really doing some crazy things to get performance even better than it is. So keep an eye out for that. There's always improvements that we're working on. And if you have any issues, any questions, any enhancement ideas, anything like that, we're very, very active on GitHub. So open issues, ask questions, go to our Discord as well. We're very welcoming of new people to the platform who have questions or concerns. And we're always active in those communities. So definitely hit us up. And just so I know what I'm not doing well or doing well, but mostly not doing well, you can hit this URL here and you can give some feedback on this talk. I'd love to hear what people want to see more of, what people want to see less of, things like that. More demos, more hands-on code stuff, I don't know. But definitely let me know, let us know. And if you go to here and you enter your feedback and stuff, you could be entered into, or you will be entered into a draw to get access to a introduction to Uno platform course, which does a lot better deep dive than I do into actually like building from scratch Uno applications. And it's a really great course online. So yeah, so definitely I'll leave this up for a few more seconds, but definitely feel free to leave me any feedback. My feelings won't be hurt, and you'll be entered to win one of these courses, which is really great. Yeah, and so with that, I would like to thank you for having me. It was really a great honor. You could tweet at me. I have my GitHub here, and I'm open for questions. So if I may not be able to answer all your questions because I don't know all the answers, but you can always tweet at me or go to our Discord and I'll ask people smarter than me and get back to you. But yeah, if there are any questions, definitely let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'm looking at the chat if there are any questions for Steve right now. But I don't see any. Either your talk was very, very good and everybody knows now what everything is about, or we lost someone there. But yeah, for me it was very interesting. I'll definitely give it a look and see what we can do with Uno. And yeah, Fußball im TV. Hi Kai. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you. Great.
All right. Well, Steve, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you very much for telling us about Uno platform. I hope everybody gets a little more curious and will try it out. And yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.